But I think the Hanoi summit was a deeply impactful event for Kim Jong-un, right? The disappointment, the shock that he couldn't make the deal with President Trump. Now, in his mind, there's no need to return to dialogue. I think for Kim, it makes sense to hold off, continue to develop and improve their capability. So later, one day, when he sits down with the United States, they have more leverage to have a real negotiation where they can have sanctions lifted.
My question is then, what is the other options that the United States can utilize to kind of preemptive strike?
Realistically, it's not really on the table. Korean Peninsula is not like in Afghanistan, right? It's a very different situation. We cannot possibly envision having an all-out conflict here.
I haven't seen any kind of attempt to have any meaningful dialogue with North Korea. So what do you think about that?
No, the Biden administration did try, but it's the North Koreans, they're not interested. So I share your frustration, and I agree with you in this respect.
My question is that then who's is more get the advantage at this moment?
I think time is actually on North Korea's side if in terms of North Korea achieving their goal.
First, about the North Korean policy of the United States, Biden administration, and also South Korean, the Yoon government. You mentioned that you said that a clear message from Kim, time is on our side. It's a very difficult question. Actually, we are not sure at this moment, time is whose side. You see, it seems to be that North Korea has relentlessly pursued their nuclear weapons since the breakout of the Hanoi summit in 2019. And you probably know very well that at the end of 2019, North Korea has introduced a frontal breakthrough line, which is a little bit weird translation, but the North Korea has actually used that one, 정면 돌파전. And then they are clearly mentioning that this is kind of a confrontational policies against South Korea and United States. And they are saying that unless South Korea and United States would give up this hostile policy toward the North Korea, they are going to have any kind of meaningful dialogue with these two countries. And at the same time, they're saying that this is like a long-term strategy. So at this moment, I don't think North Korea has no intention to have any kind of a dialogue with South Korea and United States. But my question is that then who's is more get the advantage at this moment? Of course, it depends on the North Korean situation, their economic difficulties. But still, it seems to me North Korea has a very good kind of environment to develop their nuclear weapons. So my first question to you is that time is whose side?
I think time is actually on North Korea's side if in terms of North Korea achieving their goal, which is really still getting international acceptance of North Korea as a nuclear weapons power. Because right now, we are unable to stop. Like we're doing all these things, the exercises, we're doing trilateral cooperation, all of that. But are we able to stop North Korea from testing? No, we're not. They're continually testing. I just listed out this whole presentation. I gave you step by step what they tested in October, in November, now solid fuel. Is there anything that we can do to stop them? No. So they will continue down on this path. There is absolutely no repercussion for North Korea. United Nations Security Council is there's inaction. China and Russia are completely not enforcing sanctions. They're not pressuring North Korea. So what's to stop Kim Jong-un from continuing down on this path and perfect their capability? Now I said the next capability is re-entry. The next capability is multiple warheads. They're going to continue down on this path. Meanwhile, there is complete lack of sort of interest, even in the US media, US public. There's an ICBM. In 2017, it used to be such a big deal. I used to run all day long from interview after interview, TV after TV, for any kind of missile test. Now, there's an ICBM, like, okay, solid fuel rocket engine test, all right, whatever that is. Hwasang 18, okay, that sounds like, there's the whole world is distracted, understandably so, with Russia's war invasion of Ukraine. There's US-China competition. There's a whole lot of things going on in the world. So North Korea is just there's a space for North Korea to continue down on this path. In terms of their economy, of course, they're suffering, but Kim Jong-un is not suffering. The elites are not suffering. It's just the public that's suffering. That doesn't impact the regime. So in terms of North Korea achieving their goal, I feel like their time is on their side, and I'm very frustrated.
Well, actually, I basically agree with you. But at the same time, there is some kind of a repercussion about this North Korea's relentless pursuit of a nuclear weapon. The most important one is that finally, South Korea and Japan is getting normalized the relationship, and we are seeing the growing enhanced cooperation, security cooperation among three countries. And probably this summit will announce put the importance of this trilateral cooperation. And without the North Koreans, these provocations, I don't think it's possible. You know that very well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and this is why I mentioned in terms of policy recommendation, that's the only thing we can do, and that's a very good path that we are on, because we have to make it we have to make it costly for North Korea to do it. If we don't do that, then truly there is no cost. So it is absolutely true that at least there is some. This is better than completely doing nothing about we need to respond in some way, and trilateral cooperation, strengthening cooperation, this is one way to respond, and I'm glad that at least this is happening.
Right, and at the same time, I think because of the Ukraine war, you see, NATO is one more time come to the solidarity one more time led by United States, and also because the very close connection between the Russia and North Korea and the many countries in the world, of course, most of the liberal countries, they consider the North Korea is one of the bad guy with side with Russia. It means that it's more difficult to lifting up the sanctions. You know that the North Korea is the ultimate goal is the lifting up sanctions with the status as the nuclear weapon state. So I think that's another repercussion that North Korea is the endless pursuit of nuclear weapons.
We know that North Koreans want sanctions lifted, but I think the Hanoi summit was a deeply impactful event for Kim Jong-un, right? The disappointment, the shock, like he couldn't make the deal with President Trump. But so now in his mind, there's no need to return to dialogue, just to talk about a little bit of sanctions relief here and there. I think for Kim, it makes sense to hold off, continue to develop and improve their capability, so later one day when he sits down with the United States, they have more leverage to have a real negotiation where they can have sanctions lifted.
Okay, then I slightly change the subject about the Biden administration's policy toward North Korea. See, people, including me, we are kind of some negative view about their policy, because many people are saying that it's simply the strategic patience of Obama administration season 2 or 2.0, and especially the special representative to North Korea, the Ambassador Sung Kim, still he is in Indonesia, and we haven't seen him a lot. Of course, he sometimes...
I saw him yesterday.
Yeah, right, he sometimes comes to Korea, and but still I believe that it's symbolized the importance, priority of the North Korean issue among the Washington, D.C. He's supposed to be in the State Department all the times, and he traveled a lot to South Korea, Japan, even some sense China and Russia too. But so I think what is your overall assessment of and especially President Biden himself, he didn't mention at all about North Korea except the last year summit, and the reporters asked him to say something to Kim Jong-un, and he said, hello. I think that's this upcoming summit, I don't think Biden will say another thing. But problem is that if you are saying that the time is the North Korean side, and then we will have to bit more actively pursue the diplomatic front too. And of course, it is important to enhance strength our deterrence capability, but at the same time, we know that it is important to have the diplomatic activity, but I haven't seen any kind of the attempt to have any meaningful dialogue with North Korea. So what do you think about that?
Well, so, no, the Biden administration did try, but it's the North Koreans that are not interested. So I share your frustration, and I agree with you in this respect. When the Biden administration announced after months of North Korea review that they came out with their policy, and then they said, this is not strategic patience, this is not maximum pressure, this is not Trump's grand bargain strategy, all or nothing, this is not Obama's strategic patience. Well, it does look a lot like strategic patience, even if they say so. So, it does look like there's not much of movement coming out, other than the defense trying to coordinate with our allies in terms of defense exercises and all that. So I do share the frustration that there's not some sort of a momentum. They look like they're distracted over other issues. But at the same time, what is it exactly the Biden administration is supposed to be doing? So when you think about, like, if I ask you, so what should they do? Then it's really hard to answer that question, because they already said to North Koreans, we'll meet you anytime, any place without a precondition. But again, Kim Jong-un's calculation is now that he doesn't want to sit down with Americans. So as long as North Korea does not want to sit down with Americans, what is it that we're supposed to do? Are we supposed to just preemptively give sanctions relief? What are we supposed to do? So it's both. I absolutely feel your frustration. I'm frustrated too. At the same time, when I'm like, well, what should they do? It's really hard to come up with an answer to that.
Yes, that's a very important point. And you know that after the Biden administration has introduced North Korean policy, and I think 2 or 3 days after Kim Yo-jong issued the statement that they are not interested at all about the dialogue, especially without any condition, which means that the United States should come up with some kind of conditions. Yeah. Of course, it's very hard to suggest any kind of condition. Even North Korea had any intention to come down the negotiation table, but still, overall, it is true that the North Korean issue is not the top priority at all in the Biden administration foreign policy agendas. So that makes us a little bit frustrated. And then I will ask about what about the South Koreans' audacious initiative, 담대한 구상? You know that there are 3 principles in deterrence, dissuasion, and dialogue. But also, it seems to me deterrence and dissuasion is pretty much emphasized at this moment. But we haven't seen any attempt to have a dialogue with North Korea. So what do you think about this audacious initiative of the Yun-seong government policy?
It's fine in theory, but again, it's not going to get anywhere, because I feel like this kind of proposal of like, we're going to do these wonderful things only if you're going to give up nuclear weapons, it's not realistic, because North Koreans have no intention, no desire. That's not what Kim Jong-un is interested in. So I think no amount of, like in President Trump, it was kind of similar with President Trump's, that video he showed to Kim Jong-un during Singapore summit, like, we can do these wonderful things in North Korea and develop real estate, this and that. And Kim Jong-un's like, okay, no, not if it means I have to give up nuclear weapons. So it's fine in theory. I just don't see it being overly practical at this point, because this is not where Kim Jong-un's mindset is. So it's fine for us to sort of have it, but it doesn't, I don't see it as something that's, and it has, practical implication in this current environment.
At this very moment, it's very clear that it's some kind of deadlock in terms of the dialogue with North Korea. Okay, then I'm going to ask about what you have make a presentation about the North Korea's nuclear capability. I basically agree with what you have said, that most of them. But a couple of points, and you already mentioned that North Korea has not completed their nuclear capability, especially their capability to attack the mainland of the United States. For example, like a re-entry capability and MRIV. Still, I believe that they have to have at least several more rounds of this solid fuel, the Hwasong-18s. Also, you mentioned that the missile defense of the United States is not enough. Then my question is, then what is the other options that the United States can utilize to deter the North Korea? I mean, the missile defense is one of them, but it's not fully utilized, still have some problem. Then kind of preemptive strike?
I think realistically, the preemptive strike option is not on the table. Even though you will hear defense officials always say all options are on the table, realistically, it's not really on the table, because Korean Peninsula is not like in Afghanistan, right? It's a very different situation. We cannot possibly envision having an all-out conflict here. And the problem with preemptive strike is that we are concerned about not being able to control the whole escalation, right, escalatory cycle. So if that's really off the table in a realistic sense, then what are our capabilities? I mean, abilities. The only, only things that we can do are this on what we listed here on the, right? We have a missile defense, enhancing our missile defense, both and mainland at home from U.S.'s perspective, and theater missile defense in the area, and working with South Korea and Japan. And then, of course, really strengthening extended deterrence. And I hope the reaffirmation of extended deterrence when the joint statement comes out. I hope, we need to go strong. We need to be able to say any kind of attack from North Korea, if nuclear attack, whether it's small scale or large scale, will be met with that kind of retaliation. We need to have a very strong stance that's credible. And then, working with allies, so it's really defense and deterrence and sanctions. I know it's highly unsatisfactory, but we don't really, those are the most realistic options we have.
All right, then it's going to be a little bit difficult because you see South Korea, you know that we have a so-called 삼축, three-pillar strategy. And it does not exclude the possibility to have a preemptive strike. Of course, if North Korea is really simply ready to launch their nuclear missiles against South Korea, every country has its own right for the self-defense to have a preemptive strike. But South Korea's three pillars are actually enhancing this kind of capability. You know that the KMD, kill chain, and KPMPR. But in Korea, because of the North Korea's very enhanced nuclear capability, including me, we are a little bit suspicious about these three pillars because basically the nuclear weapon could not be deterred by the conventional weapon. So what do you think about that? Do you think the three pillars, 삼축, is still a available option for South Korea's defense?
I mean, it has to be because even North Koreans, with all the enhancement, advancement that they're making on their nuclear missile program, on top of all the talk and rhetoric of preemptive use, their new nuclear doctrine, we have to be. South Korea has to be. I think South Korea has to be able to defend itself, and you don't want to, you cannot be left vulnerable. So to me, absolutely, it has to be. Yeah.
And then you mentioned about the last September, North Korea has introduced the new law about the nuclear promulgation, and then we are clearly seeing that I agree with that. Kim Jong-un has no intention to give up their nuclear weapons. And then what is the ultimate goal of North Korea? I mean, right now in Washington, D.C., I know that there are various ideas and policy suggestions about the so-called denuclearization of North Korea. And some people are saying that it is time to accept North Korea as de facto nuclear weapon state because it is unrealistic to denuclearize, see the idea of North Korea. And another group said that it is time to start with the arms reduction talk or even partial denuclearization, and those are some kind of worrisome sign for the South Korea. So what is your opinion for these kind of ideas, including the ultimate goal of the North Korea?
While I agree that denuclearization is probably very unrealistic goal, Kim Jong-un is not going to give up nuclear weapons, even so, I think we should not give it up in terms of policy because it has its own implications when you say we give up denuclearization as a goal. And I think it's premature to come back to just a freeze or arms control or capping. And by the way, we can have that kind of agreement with North Korea. Every single agreement in the past with North Korea fell apart over verification. So even with the capping and arms control, I don't necessarily know if that they're not going to secretively continue on the program. In terms of Kim Jong-un's ultimate goal, I think they want to perfect their capability. I think they want to be accepted as a nuclear weapons power. I think the long-term goal is really to separate U.S.-ROC alliance. If they can get the troops out of South Korea, they will love that. Again, it's not a totally crazy scenario that, President Trump used to talk about putting troops out of South Korea. It's not a crazy scenario where in the future, if we have under different U.S. administration, that Kim Jong-un again could calculate that you could de-link U.S.-ROC alliance. So again, I think that's their ultimate goal. And I'm just concerned that in the next few years, because we are at an impasse, because we're not going to return to dialogue, and because they have a wide open pathway for continuing their program, that they're going to just continue down this path and we're not going to be able to get them off this path. So that's my concern.
All right, I think we are running out of time, so probably it's going to be a last question to you.
Okay.
And about the China and Russia. So
Yeah.
we are getting tired about what they've done in terms of the denuclearization of North Korea. Is there any chance that we can get any kind of support from the
Yeah.
cooperation from these two countries?
The short answer, I think, right now, unfortunately, is no. I think we are 2020. We got China and Russia to do a little bit more, implement sanctions, whatnot. Again, the fall of 2017. 2023 is not 2017. So much has happened since then. And two recent events of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the increasing great power competition between US and China, it made everything much more bifurcated, polarized, and we are now not going to see any kind of help. I think we cannot expect any kind of help coming out of China and Russia on the North Korean question.
All right, great. And I think you know that Dr. Terry is one of the leading figures in of course, she has such a great interest and affection to South Korea. And I'm very pleased to have the chance to talk with Dr. Terry, and we have to stop here. Okay, thank you very much.